As far as an audience is concerned, I think it is more important for an artist to know what other artists have done than to know what their audience wants.
Yes.
Because an audience, that's what an audience does, is do what I just described, is to latch onto an image of an artist and use that as sort of a fixed projection. And the artist needs to recognize what that projection looks like, but they also need to know how to move past it. That it's not them, that they can do whatever they want, and that to continue making good art, they need to be able to move past it, basically. I started looking toward other artists who did make a career out of it, who had talent and were able to sustain it throughout a career. And actually, Frank Sinatra is someone I was looking at. I read his biography when I was finishing up Teens of Denial, and that ended up shaping the album as well. I didn't know anything about the music industry. I didn't know how to promote myself. I didn't know who I needed to know to sort of make it happen. All I knew was how to make music. So I figured I didn't want to do any of that other stuff. So I figured I would just focus on making the best music I could and doing it as much as possible. I mean, it was really a self-fulfilling thing. I'd look back on the music I created and say, everyone else is crazy because this is great. The audience is allowed to say whatever they like about the art.
Yes.
And the artist needs to have a strong presence of mind, basically, and to say, okay, you can have this, but you can't have this because there are things that are more important. There's a show called Steven Universe, which I'm not sure, it's a cartoon show. And the first season, I'm thinking about it because I'm angry about it, because the first season was so good, and it clearly had the sort of like auteur approach where someone knew exactly what the story was throughout the whole season, and the characters fell into line there. And what happened was it got latched onto by a certain fan base, which is kind of like the car seat fan base. They're internet people who are deeply attached to the art that they like. And what happened is there was sort of a feedback loop between the audience and the creators, and they stopped caring so much about the narrative that had been in place and about the character development that had been in place, and they just started feeding off of the audience attention and saying, here's a character that you guys might like, here's another character that you guys might like.
And that didn't make sense to you because you wanted the authorial voice behind the
right.
You wanted an authorial control.
And and I feel like more people do want that. It's not on the audience to express that desire. What I make now are genre albums, I guess. Teens of Denial is very a rock and roll album, but that doesn't mean that Car Seat Headrest is a rock and roll band to me. It means that right now we're playing rock and roll music because that's the album we just put out. But I don't want to be a rock and roll band, and we put out this record because we like rock and roll, and I like the idea of a rock and roll album. But the next album we put out, I don't think it's going to be that way, and I think that we'll do a lot of different albums.
You're a formalist in a way. I just am realizing, talking to you, you're engaged in this formal creation of art, and as the creator of it, you're aware of what came before, and you're aware of the medium you're working in and the way in which you want to control that medium. And you're not in a group, you're not making group art beyond your own immediate band. And I know it's not a very exact definition of formalism, but in the way that the Cones are formalized.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, because what I make now are genre albums, I guess. But that doesn't mean that Car Seat Headrest is a rock and roll band to me. It means that right now we're playing rock and roll music because that's the album we just put out. But I don't want to be a rock and roll band. And, we put out this record because we like rock and roll, and I like the idea of a rock and roll album. But the next album we put out, I don't think it's going to be that way. And I think that we'll do a lot of different albums.